Before his cousins were out of sight down the canyon, Chee was walking toward the fields, a bold plan shaping in his mind. As the plan began to flourish, wild and hardy as a young tumbleweed, Chee added his own voice softly to the song his father was singing.
In the middle of the wide field, yellow corn boy, I wish to put in.
Chee walked slowly around the field, the red, rich earth yielding to his footsteps. His plan depended upon this land and upon the things he remembered most about his wife's people. Through planting time, Chee worked zealously and tirelessly. He spoke little of the large new field he was planting, because he felt so strongly that just now this was something between himself and the land. The first days he was ever stooping, piercing the ground with the pointed stick, placing the corn kernels there, walking around the field and through it, singing,
His track leads into the ground, yellow corn boy. His track leads into the ground.
After that, each day Chee walked through his fields, watching for the tips of green to break through. First a few spikes in the center, and then more and more until the corn in all parts of the field was above ground. Surely, Chee thought, if he sang the proper songs, if he cared for the land faithfully, it would not forsake him now, even though through the lonely days of winter he had betrayed the goodness of the earth in his thoughts. Through the summer, Chee worked long days, the sun hot upon his back, pulling weeds from around the young corn plants. He planted squash and pumpkin. He terraced a small piece of land near his mother's hogan and planted carrots and onions and the moisture-loving chili. He was increasingly restless. Finally, he told his family what he hoped the harvest from this land would bring him. Then the whole family waited with him, watching the corn. The slender, graceful plants that waved green arms and bent to embrace each other as young winds wandered through the field. The maturing plants flaunting their pollen-laden tassels in the sun. The tall and sturdy parent corn with new-formed ears and a froth of purple, red, and yellow corn beards against the dusty emerald of broad leaves. Summer was almost over when Chee slung the bulging packs across 2 pack ponies. His mother helped him tie the heavy rolled pack behind the saddle of the buckskin. Chee knotted the new yellow kerchief above his neck a little tighter, gave the broad black hat brim an extra tug, but these were only gestures of assurance, and he knew it. The land had not failed him. That part was done. But this he was riding into? Who could tell? When Chee arrived at Red Sands, it was as he expected to find it. No cars on the highway. His cousins had told him that even the Pueblo farmers were using the new cutoff to town. The barren gravel around the Red Sands trading post was deserted. A sign banged against the dismantled gas pumps. Closed until further notice. Old Man Fat came from the crude summer shelter built beside the log hogan from a few branches of scrub cedar and the sides of wooden crates. He seemed almost friendly when he saw Chee.
Get down, my son,
he said, eyeing the bulging packs. There was no bluster in his voice today, and his face sagged, looking somewhat saddened, perhaps because his cheeks were no longer quite full enough to push his eyes upward at the corners.
You're going on a journey?
Chee shook his head. Our fields gave us so much this year. I thought to sell or trade this to the trader. I didn't know he was no longer here. Old Man Fat sighed, his voice dropping to an injured tone.
He says he and his wife are going to rest this summer. Then after that, he'll build a place up on the new highway.
Chee moved as though to be traveling on, then jerked his head toward the pack ponies. Anything you need?
I'll ask my wife,
Old Man Fat said as he led the way to the shelter.
Maybe she has a little money. Things have not been too good with us since the trader closed. Only a few tourists come this way.
He shrugged his shoulders.
And with the trader gone, no credit.
Chee was not deceived by his father-in-law's unexpected confidences. He recognized them as a hopeful bid for sympathy and, if possible, something for nothing. Chee made no answer. He was thinking that so far he had been right about his wife's parents. Their thriftlessness had left them with no resources to last until Old Man Fat found another easy way of making a living. Old Man Fat's wife was in the shelter working at her loom. She turned rather wearily when her husband asked, with noticeable deference, if she would give him money to buy supplies. Chee surmised that the only income here was from his mother-in-law's weaving. She peered around the corner of the shelter at the laden ponies. Then she looked at Chee.
"What do you have there, my son?"
Chee smiled to himself as he turned to pull the pack from one of the ponies, dragged it to the shelter where he untied the ropes. Pumpkins and hard-shell squash tumbled out, and the ears of corn, pale yellow husks fitting firmly over the plump ripe kernels, blue corn, red corn, yellow corn, many-colored corn, ears and ears of it, tumbled into every corner of the shelter.
"Oh,"
Old Man's wife exclaimed as she took some of the ears in her hands. Then she glanced up at her son-in-law.
"But we have no money for all this. We have sold almost everything we own, even the brass bed that stood in the hogan."
Old Man Fat's brass bed. Chee concealed his amusement as he started back for another pack. That must have been a hard parting. Then he stopped, for, coming from the cool darkness of the hogan, was the little one, rubbing her eyes as though she had been asleep. She stood for a moment in the doorway, and Chee saw that she was dirty, barefoot, her hair uncombed, her little blouse shorn of all its silver buttons. Then she ran toward Chee, her arms outstretched. Heedless of Old Man Fat and his wife, her father caught her in his arms, her hair falling in a dark cloud across his face, the sweetness of her laughter warm against his shoulder. It was the haste within him to get this slow waiting game played through to the finish that made Chee speak unwisely. It was the desire to swing her before him in the saddle and ride fast to the little canyon that prompted his words. "The money doesn't matter. You still have something—" Chee knew immediately that he had overspoken. The old woman looked from him to the corn spread before her. Unfriendliness began to harden in his father-in-law's face. All the old arguments between himself and his wife's people came pushing and crowding in between them now. Old Man Fat began kicking the ears of corn back onto the canvas as he eyed Chee angrily.
"And you rode all the way over here thinking that for a little food we would give up our daughter's daughter?"
Chee did not wait for the old man to reach for the little one. He walked dazedly to the shelter, rubbing his cheek against her soft dark hair, and put her gently into her grandmother's lap. Then he turned back to the horses. He had failed. By his own haste he had failed. He swung into the saddle, his hand touching the roll behind it. Should he ride on into town? Then he dismounted, scarcely glancing at Old Man Fat, who stood uncertainly at the corner of the shelter, listening to his wife. "Give me a hand with this other pack of corn, grandfather," Chee said, carefully keeping the small bit of hope from his voice. Puzzled but willing, Old Man Fat helped carry the other pack to the shelter, opening it to find more corn as well as carrots and round, pale yellow onions. Chee went back for the roll behind the buckskin saddle and carried it to the entrance of the shelter, where he cut the ropes and gave the canvas a nudge with his toe. Tins of coffee rolled out, small, plump cloth bags, jerked meat from several butcherings spilled from a flour sack, and red, bright chilies splashed like flames against the dust. "I will leave all this anyhow," Chee told them. "I would not want my daughter, nor even you old people, to go hungry." Old Man Fat picked up a shiny tin of coffee, then put it down. With trembling hands, he began to untie one of the cloth bags. Dried sweet peaches. The little one had wriggled from her grandmother's lap, unheeded, and was on her knees, digging her hands into the jerked meat. "There's almost enough food here to last all winter." Old Man Fat's wife sought the eyes of her husband. Chee said, "I meant it to be enough, but that was when I thought you might send the little one back with me." He looked down at his daughter, noisily sucking jerky. Her mouth, both fists, were full of it. "I am sorry you feel you cannot bear to part with her." Old Man Fat's wife brushed a straggly wisp of gray hair from her forehead as she turned to look at the little one. Old Man Fat was looking too, and it was not a thing to see. For in that moment the little one ceased to be their daughter's daughter and became just another mouth to feed.
"And why not?"
the old woman asked wearily. Chee was settled in the saddle, and the barefooted little one before him. He urged the buckskin faster, and his daughter clutched his shirt front. The purpling mesas flung back the echo.
My corn embrace each other in the middle of the wide field. Yellow corn boy embrace each other.